Well, greetings and welcome to Lies and Scandal Lit. I'm Lies.
And I am Scandal.
And we are responding to the book preview of The Kingdom by Jess Rothenberg.
And read by myself.
Scandal.
Whee!
Alright, so the two of us had some opinions about this book, but we also had some questions. So, honestly, it was interesting when it first started. I liked the back and forth timeline where it was clear that you were addressing in the future something that happened in the past, but then it got really confusing as far as when these things happened. It felt like it was decades, and then it was years, and then it was, whatever it was. So anyway, I felt like the various times the time was mentioned, I couldn't tell how long ago this was.
Quite.
For when these things, the fantasists were first invented, or when the problems first started, any of it.
Okay, well, just in case, if you guys haven't listened to the preview, you should. It will give you more context for this review, because we're doing this under the assumption that you've actually already listened to it.
And if you haven't listened to the preview, but you have read the book, then you'll probably be on board anyway.
Yeah, pretty much. I will also say, at least for me, so I was kind of having some of those issues. One thing I was actually really curious about is a weird disconnect of going, this is all innocent, basically Disney funland, where you have all the mascots and all basically the workers, except in this case it's 7 fantastical humanoid cyborg android things that seem to be completely innocent. And yet there's this element potential, like they mention in one part of it, Jess writes, that there's this thing of going, can be your ultimate fantasy, and you can even go home at the end of the day with a video that has been taken of you in your perfect, basically, fairy tale fantasy land, right? Or, in some cases, a villain. And it's one line, and it's the only one that I ever read, and I was going, hang on, does this mean that you can do horrible things to these fantasists? Or and everyone there?
Yeah.
Like, because not everybody... so, this is me. Not everybody is going to be that friendly. Actually, they've pointed out, so they've even had, actors who do live performance art, right? Who just stand there and invite... there was actually a specific example I'm thinking of.
Not in the preview.
Not in the preview. No, I know that. But I'm talking about... I'm talking about the villain thing. Okay. I'm talking about an artist thing. So I'm talking about a real-life, real-world thing, my friend.
Oh, okay. So you're comparing the thing in the book to a real-life thing.
Yes, because I was going, so the context is so I know for our world, right, when there was an artist who was a live performance artist, and she had a table spread out with various objects in front of her. One of them was like a rose, there was something else, and there was scissors or something, and it was interesting. And she just said, she invited the crowd to basically do whatever they wanted to her. Initially, nobody really believed her, and then she mentioned, as the thing went on, it was supposed to be a 3-hour thing or something. It was a short period of time, but after a while, it started becoming really uncomfortable because people started taking the scissors and cutting off her clothes, started cutting her hair, started stabbing her with thorns. They started, so it was, but I'm saying, if you could have whatever you wanted, and they're going, you can have the villain aspect to this, and I'm like, people have proven that we will do that sort of thing to anybody because we don't know what it's like to interact with a real person sometimes. Having that much power. I was wondering, going, is the kingdom going to do that? But it never came up in the preview. So I was actually, I'm curious to go, where is this going?
Okay, so I was not prepared for that at all. I was going to say, because these have all been completely focused on books, so the book itself so far. I'll say, but
this is the book.
For me, in responding to the book, the experience I had was they mention that you can be a villain. They also mention you can have any fantasy you want, that you can do whatever you want, that they are within the realms of basically human imagination. They're trying to cater to everything. And so
they won't even say no. Unless you want them to.
And they also have a number of different lines where it suggests incredibly mature content to this kingdom, in reference to they won't say no unless you want them to, in reference to they're always happy to help you with anything. That they are the models of perfect women
and submission,
and of
and that women are submissive. I
say not models of submission, but models of women, and that they are soft and and submissive, and they never shout and they never raise their voices, and that falls into the line of they never say no unless you want them to. And there's just line after line, even in this very brief preview, which suggests an incredibly, I don't know how to put it really without being completely explicit. It suggests a sexual wonderland for adults where they can do whatever deviant thing they want to with these princesses and in these environments, where they can be any kind of villain they want to or any kind of hero they want to. Whether it's taking the princess home at the end of the day and having your way with them because they want to, or whether it's the villain literally tearing everything up in any way they want to. And I know a lot of children's villains are written very non-sexually, but real humans tend to be far more sexual than the books will write them out to be.
Even if it's just in the sense of I'm experimenting with this because everybody else around me insists that the world is made of sexuality or whatever it is. In any case,
anyway, so
like,
that was really tough for me reading this, where it's like, this is a teen fiction, and while it's not inappropriate to bring sex into teen fiction because that becomes part of your life and your world very early, especially in America, that it just felt really uncomfortable to me to have these continual, basically, little indications that really horrendous things could be going on,
right?
Or that anything could be going on, and that you have these fantasists being these complex, real people, except that they also have these weird, petty little interactions and stuff like that, too.
Well, see, and that was actually, so I was flapping off while I was reading it, just going like, I don't, because, so the way that that Jess Rothenberg seems to be trying to write this is going, they're robots, or at least everybody around them is going, they're robots, but obviously being inside of this character's head,
and their full experiences, they're not robots at all.
With Anna, I believe is her name.
Yes.
With Anna, it's just going like, Anna is clearly a person.
Yes.
She might have basically different, what I would say, almost like differently abled thoughts. Basically, in some ways, she might be, to some people, have some form of potentially, I see this very, very lightly, potentially like some form of like different abledness, whether she has like some sort of like high-functioning autism or autistic neurodivergency in some way. You could make that argument. But then it's also like,
that's what her programming comes down to.
But then also, if she's supposed to have been growing into this slowly over time, I didn't see it. For that little preview, I'm like, I don't understand, because this is supposed to be, because it does, it goes back 2 years, and you go, okay, and now I'm going to run into mostly robot, right? Because we're trying to establish in the very beginning that she's an object. So she's not a person. And the writer can't write that, because I love where somebody's pointing out going, we don't know how to write basically computer or robots or basically this function very well at all. We're terrible at it. And unfortunately I was like, I don't feel like this is a very good example of it.
So for me, I wasn't sure. I kept waffling back and forth between either the author is trying to do something incredibly subtle in going, yes, of course they're objects, but you can clearly see they're not. And also in the way of going, yes, they're robots, except for they're distinctly not, as they grow hair, as they take in nutrition, as they have blood systems. Like, they literally take them off in a Hunger Games stylist kind of way daily to have them waxed and treated and shaved and basically manicured to be these perfect
There's a whole ridiculous line, yeah.
And I'm like, you could have real girls doing that.
Yeah.
And have them be, have their diets tailored, have their exercise tailored, have their, fashion as well as their makeup and everything else tailored.
Well, in fantasies they don't eat, but, they have
but they take in nutrient supplements.
Yeah, they take in some type of nutrient supplement, which is weird. I'm like, you don't consider nutrient supplements to be food?
To be food. Nope. Pills are not food, or whatever it is, whether it's liquid or anything. It's a nutrient supplement.
This feels like a person who went, I'm going to do sci-fi. And I've read so much more sci-fi, this sounds very awkward to me, of like somebody who's inexperienced in writing sci-fi.
And generally, I was interested in what had happened. Scandal was interested enough to keep reading the book and go, I want to actually see where this goes. But just as a preview, I felt that the language actually had a hard time sometimes, too.
Quite.
Sudden things once in a while just threw me off, where you had a sudden use of haute couture. And I was just like, that felt so out of line with what the rest of they described that I was suddenly very surprised. Not that the dresses aren't that kind of fashion, but it felt very weird. So generally, I liked what the author was going for. I felt like the idea, based on what I'd been exposed to, was fairly fresh, but I felt like the timeline was very hard to understand, and like either I couldn't access it easily, or that it actually did disagree with itself, or they were talking about several different things and it wasn't clear when they were talking about different things.
Well, and again, because they're following one character around, like what I said earlier, at least lies alone, is that it could be just an unreliable narrator. So if you guys don't know what an unreliable narrator is it's if your point of view character that the story is focused on, like in this case, it's focused on Anna, so you'll see it a lot in first-person books, like you can read it in the Hunger Games, that's a first-person book, but you can have basically your narrator, the person the point of view of the story is coming from, is unreliable. Because they're not telling you accurate information. They don't actually understand what's going on.
Exactly.
They are basically in a bad space. They're being emotional or whatever it may be. They're in pain. They're distracted.
For the most part, it's really just that they're not perceiving things as they genuinely are.
Right.
So your unreliable narrator is just not perceiving things as they genuinely are. And sometimes I wondered if Anna was an unreliable narrator and if that's where the book was going. But I get very frustrated with unreliable narrator experiences.
God, me too.
Because then it's basically like, well, it was all a dream. It's basically, we told you an entire story that wasn't actually the story. And I go, well, then why did I bother learning and being invested in all of that information if it wasn't actual real information?
And
Anyway.
at least for me, then I'm going, then that's not a very good character. But anyway, so I guess this was the preview for The Kingdom. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Well, this was the reaction to the preview.
That is true.
So
it's another part of it.
We have, if you'd like to get exposed to some other new books or things that you haven't read, check out our other previews on our channel where we have short reactions to them. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves out there.
Enjoy.
I'm Liz.
And I am Scandal.
Bye.
Bye.